I'd like to welcome you guys to our study session for the Timpanogos School District. It is 4 o'clock on Wednesday, August 12th. We're going to start our study session. I don't have the agenda, but I feel like we are good to start and turn the time over to Dave Maurer and Jason Sundberg for our presentation on our boundary study.
Okay. Is this on? No, testing.
Ryan's coming.
Testing? Yep. Nice. Okay. Joe and I went over this just a little while ago. I was feeling great, but then I just ate 10 chicken nuggets. Now I feel horrible. So I'm glad to be with you. I don't know if you guys have figured out your pay hourly, but you may not want to. I've been watching you guys. I'm sure it's pennies. Anyway, it's a lot of time on this. Big thanks to Joe, Jason, Karen. They've been the engine behind this boundary study. A lot of it started even before some of us were named, and so appreciate their time. I'm just here presenting. I've gotten in tune with it, but they've done all the work behind this, so a lot of gratefulness towards them. We'll get through this, but anytime we're on a slide, if you guys have comments, feel free to discuss it. Don't feel like we got to get through the presentation. And just whenever you have a thought, just, you've got the presentations in front of you so that you can make notes if you want to. But yeah, speak up. That's kind of what this is for. There's no decisions made yet on all this, so we're still in the talking phase, but we're getting darn close to making some decisions. So that's kind of what this leads us into. Okay, first slide there, just a reminder that we have a vision in Timpanogos, and that's what guides us. And so as we look at that, that's the starting point, that we want a great education, something that's joyful, something that makes our students thrive. And that's kind of what the point of this is about. From that vision, we started to establish a process, and from that process, some criteria. So just a reminder on this slide what the process has been. We started with the vision, we created the criteria. We're now developing potential options, and we're just kind of near the end of that. And we're going to start to make some decisions. On August 26th, just to remind you guys, that's when you guys determine when this 90-day clock starts on what schools we intend to look very closely to close, what intentions we have. Go ahead.
Can we just say that when you say we're very near the point of naming schools, or that's like phase 3? So we're moving from phase 2 into phase 3. Is that correct?
Yes, and since we added that vision and values kind of as a starting point, is now between 3 and 4, but that doesn't matter. It's just, and so by August 26th, we'll actually have a list of schools that we intend to study for closure. And that's when kind of the clock begins. And so today, we're kind of going to give direction to staff of what process you want to look at. And that's kind of what we're going to go over in this slide. How many schools, how broad do we want to go with the schools we're going to study? And that's kind of where we're at. The fifth one there is the board vote. That's the big thing, and that's going to happen in 2 phases. In October, on July 15th, you guys gave notice about configuration, 9th grade and 6th grade, that we're going to study that. In October, we'll make a decision there. That gives schools a little more time to figure out how to bring in that consolidation, whatever's decided. And then in December, you guys will decide which schools actually we are moving forward with closure for. So that there's kind of 2 phases in that. So that's the process. Those who've been involved, you guys of course have been involved, district leadership has been. We've had clusters, and those clusters involved that group of people. We've had boundary committees with a lot of principals on them. We have some of them right here on the front, kind of the front row, the second row. And yay! And they'll be able to, if you have any questions, they'll help answer them, because they are the ones who kind of know what's going on with the schools. We had some focus groups, even had a special DLI group where we studied that a little bit, got some answers, and there was a survey that went out. And how many people responded to the survey? Was it over 4,000? Something like that. So a lot of input on that survey. Okay, just to remind you that that body of people, those groups of people helped formulate this criteria and then used it as their guide as they went through this discussion. This is the first part of it. what to point out there. Go ahead, we got some questions.
I just wanted to point out that we also did ALL study, that it's not just DLI.
Well, the first elementary was supposed to address both ALL and DLI, but we recognized that the DLI didn't get enough time, so that's why we did a separate one.
Yeah,
an
so it
additional
was
one.
well discussed.
Yeah,
at the
ALL was
at the
discussed in the
one.
first one.
I just wanted to point out that
And a
that's not
reminder,
on
we
your
had
list.
in the DLI group, we had DLI parents and parents who weren't in the DLI program so that they could talk about different perspectives.
Also, in those involved in this process that we've followed, just to point out that it's above and beyond what is required by just statute.
Great point. In fact, if we go back to this process, none of this is required by code. It's all stuff that you guys have decided to do so that you can get more information, make better decisions as we go into actually what's required of us. So all this is just extra to get information and get input. Good point. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, so this part of the criteria, the things that stood out to me, all of them have special ed services that people have in their minds. So there needs to be a lot of that in mind as we make robust schools. That are we serving our special ed population in a robust way? For specialties in each school, that's when you're a small school, that can be a stretch to have those 4 specialties. So this is one of the remedies we have to try to offer lots of options for students. Okay, here's the second part, the things that stand out here to me, 3 to 5 classes per grade level. That's kind of been the target. And then a lot of other supports. And I remember several elementary principals saying that top of that list is an assistant principal and then a lot of the other supports as well. So those are priorities to them.
Could you just tell me again why the 3 to 5 was wanted as a robust school?
Yeah, I think first of all, it has to do with just the choices for students to have teachers, and then also they have a team to collaborate with so that they can learn from each other. Other things that you guys would add about that?
I think the 5 comes in with the DLI school.
Good point.
I think that's why that number's there. And on a typical school that does not have a special program, I don't think there would be 5 per grade level.
And once you get to 5, it does start to be a big school.
Yeah, and the 3 or 4 or 5 also allows for that other part of the 4 specialties. If you only have 1 or 2, it's harder to have that many specialties at a certain school.
Anything the principals would add? One thing that comes to mind as well is it just gives the opportunity to separate kids that maybe shouldn't be around each other for whatever reason, if there's a bullying situation or if there's just, whatever. But it definitely gives that option as well.
Can I ask our principals, elementary principals who are here, how many specialties they currently have in their schools and if they're funded by extra sources?
We currently have 4 specialties, and our art is through the Beverly Taylor Sorensen grant. So we have computers, PE, music, and art.
And what's your enrollment? Are you averaging?
We're about 600.
So you have.
So we have about 3 per grade level. Yeah.
Our student enrollment is about 450 to 500, so that's about 2 to 3 teachers per grade level. We have 3 specialty teachers, also using the BTS funding for our arts. However, we did have to shift to an hourly model or pay our specialty teachers an hourly rate. So it did limit like our offerings in the sense because we couldn't offer contracts.
Yeah, I'm DLI, but I have 3 classes per grade. I have 4 specialties, but I pay for 1 contracted specialist to facilitate some like teacher watch me times and things like that. So I pay for that. And I pay probably for, I don't know, another 1/10 of a salary for another hourly. But mine are all hourly except that 1 contracted.
Julie's behind you.
Okay, we're at about 360, and we have 2 teachers per grade level, and we have, you guys are you counting library? No. Okay, so I have 3 specialties, and we do have BTS, and then we also pay for some of it out of TSSA. So And I was going to say as far as class size, because we have 2 and we just barely got a second teacher in 4th grade. But one thing that is hard when when your school is really small is it's hard to balance class size because we had, either it's hard to, so I had like 36 and then it goes really small when you add another teacher. But I know that when they're bigger classes, you can kind of get them a little closer to that size.
Okay, the next slide here, and maybe Joe, maybe I want to get Julie's opinion on this too when we talk about this. But on this slide, there's a few things, but that number 5 box, just to remind everyone, even though we're looking at robust schools and the reason they're robust, for sure, there is a consideration. If you had 2 schools side by side, blocks away, and one was built 5 years ago, one was built 50 years ago, that's going to come into the thinking a little bit. So keeping that in mind, that being honest, that along with accomplishing all our criteria, those do come in. And then the far right box where we've got sizes listed, oftentimes when we start to discuss it, it does boil down to numbers. But just a reminder that those numbers are kind of in proxy of all the other criteria that we have. So we may be talking a lot about, well, this will be 1,000. We need to keep in mind, and we're reminding everyone, we do keep in mind what that 1,000 means. What it means is you can have supports. You can have an assistant principal. You can have the number of offerings that you want. So it's kind of in proxy of that. Why I wanted Julie to talk is she had a perspective in one of the committee meetings about the benefits of a smaller school. We talk about how we can't be robust, but Julie, do you want to give your perspective on that?
Well, I mean, I have a very small school, and we love being a small school. But I know, there are some benefits for being bigger, and I like how you were talking about if it's 5, it's because it's a DLI school. But yeah, it's a small school, and we've been really lucky because our teachers all get along really well because you only have one other person to collaborate with. So I can see benefits of having 3 teachers or 4 teachers to collaborate with. I don't know, anything else?
No, and I'd agree. I've been at one small school, and when Julie said that, it resonated with me because I never had such challenges with finances and with classes. Master schedule was very difficult. But when you walk out in the halls, it was really nice. You knew everyone in the halls. Everything was spread out. So it resonated with me when Julie said that, so I wanted her to make a comment.
I agree. I've thought about that comment from Julie since that meeting. And there are things like we've pronounced on the backside of this paper that are not related to school size, that we want every school to have high quality teachers and effective leadership and school culture and safety and operations. I think when we do this well, in our small schools, sometimes the behind the scenes story isn't told how difficult it is to do these things really well. So yeah, I don't know what point I'm trying to make, but just that small schools are great, but we might need to understand how they do struggle and behind the curtain some.
I would say that the real point is great leadership is great leadership, whether it's at a small school or a big school. And anyway, we appreciate principals that have great leadership skills. Thanks.
And I feel like I've seen from the board that even if we end up with some schools that are a little smaller, whatever that ends up being, that we're committed to make sure that they have all these things in place, that they're a robust school. And that might take some money or some creativity, but we want robust schools, and that's kind of the goal here, no matter where we land. Okay, any other comments? Okay, just some result. We talked about the survey as being one of the input items. This is just kind of a summary of some of the results of that survey. Again, over 4,000 people. And you can see that pretty overwhelming support for 9th graders moving to high school, although that's not decided. You guys have to decide that over time here. And then a little less, but still strong support for 6th graders to junior high. And I would say, and principals, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that in the focus groups and in the committee, I see a general reflection of this. Everybody's not convinced that's the way, but there's general support that if this happens, that it would be something that could work well, and that there's general support for these moves. Would you guys, any dissent on that? Okay. Okay, so kind of recommendations of what we're trying to do tonight. So after considering all this, we are recommending that we take one of three approaches that we're going to go over in just a minute. And again, it's kind of tiered down, and you'll see the difference there, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses. But that's kind of what we're asking you to do tonight, so that when we can go back, have more specific recommendations of which schools, and bring them back by your August meeting, where we have to decide which schools we're focusing on. Okay. So approach one would be to give notice to all Timpanogos School District schools about possible closure. So this has been talked about before. This kind of covers our basis so that we can navigate which schools will close, and also kind of puts a blanket over code. If there's any vagaries in code, we've told everyone that they're being considered for closure. Now, the thing that we discussed is this is really flexible. This really lets you navigate but it's not informative really at all to the public. It's where we are now. People don't know which schools we're moving towards right now, and they wouldn't after you took this approach. So there's kind of a trade-off there. Yes?
Does that kind of, we've said this before, everything's on the table, nothing's been decided. This is kind of moving forward with what we've said, and everything's on the table still, we're still studying. But we're going to open it up for everybody, everything to be studied. Okay, thank you.
It would seem to me like we've made no progress in the past 3 months, if that's what we do. Just going to go on record as saying that.
So it sounds like we're going with approach one.
I just think, I think it's kind of kicking the can down the road. We got to, at some point, we have to face it.
Well, and today we're trying to decide whether we're ready to face it then, right? That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and hopefully with discussion, really frank discussion tonight. Name schools. If you feel like, if you have a comment about a school, say the school, make the comment. We haven't decided, but we ought to be really frank with this conversation. That will lead us to the approach that we want. David, you had something? No?
I was going to name one,
No.
2, 3, 4, 7 schools, just to kind of see how it flows.
David's filter worked for about 10 seconds.
I
and
know.
we let it go. So, okay.
15 minutes.
So just to see the example, looking at the junior highs where we're not dealing with 22 elementary schools, we're dealing with 5. You can see it would be odd. Like, I'm sure all of you can look at that list of our junior highs and think, well, that's one we wouldn't consider. And so to go this route, to name every junior high, it really doesn't tell anybody anything, and it gets us nowhere, like that was said. But it is an option if we do want to consider lots of options and have a lot of navigability through the process. A part of this, Michelle, and then is we aren't aware anybody's ever done this. Usually when people name schools to close, they name a school or a couple of schools, and they study that for closure. This would be naming all these schools and studying it. It's a different approach for sure. But Michelle?
I was going to say to that point that the law that is in place, you have to look at the intent of the law, and I think this would not be the intent of the law, that if you're naming all the schools to give yourself flexibility, that's not really what the law wanted. It wanted the schools that you're really considering to be named and let those families know and noticed.
Okay, any other comments there? Any comments about junior highs, just even as you look at that? Is there any junior highs that strike you that that's just not reasonable? Do you want to have that discussion now about it?
Well, I was going to ask that question. Do you want us to have that discussion, or do you want to talk about the other approaches?
Let's go down. Let's get to the third one and then go discuss away. Is
Okay.
that okay. Okay. But if you have something, go ahead and say it if you're going to forget it or something like that. Okay. Approach number 2. We'd give notice to a moderately sized list that includes schools that are most likely to close and schools that could close and for sure would be impacted by those possible closures. And those impacted schools might be receiving students. There might be a boundary, pretty good sized boundary change because of that closure. Again, this would increase there'd increase flexibility from naming the exact school being closed, but it would also be a little more informative. Instead of naming 20-something schools, we would name a handful of schools, and that would be a little more informative to the public. An example of this was helpful to me when I looked at these examples. Hillcrest and Sarah Park. Peter, how do you say Sarah? Sierra. So Hillcrest and Sarah Park. They informed Hillcrest. They went through the process with Hillcrest and announced Hillcrest would be closed. Then they took Sarah Park and Hillcrest and they built a new school on the Sarah Park site and put them in that school, the majority of them. So some could argue that Sarah Park was also closed, even though geographically they didn't change the place they went to school. So I would say that if we were looking for more information for the public, it would be to announce both schools, that they're both going to be affected by a close and we're building a new school. So that's just an example. Geneva and Suncrest, same type of thing, that Geneva was informed that their school was closed and then they built a new school. Did they build a new school?
No.
They just moved them and
Changed
renamed the school. And so, again, we're not aware of even this number 2 approach being taken, where we name a little broader amount of schools, even those who will be impacted significantly. So this would be a little bit new as well. Joe?
And probably the reason, I don't know for sure, but I think the reason why this has not generally been an approach is anytime a school is named for consideration, formal study, it creates energy. And so often, I think school districts will only name the one that they're considering closing rather than the one that's also going to be affected by absorbing, because that's going to create some energy. So I think that's just something to be aware of.
Are we open to comments?
Absolutely.
Yes, and it feels to me that in reality, Sierra Park was just as impacted as Hillcrest in almost every way. And I think it would be beneficial as a board member to have input from the Sierra Park community as well as the Hillcrest community around that decision, and not just the Hillcrest. So as a board member, this appeals to me because it's giving opportunity to both of those communities that would be substantially impacted by that decision.
As a parent of a Sarah Park children, I agree wholeheartedly.
That was mine, yep.
And as a parent of a Valley View student that went to Central, it was a little bit of a different situation, but I think because of the situation surrounding the closure of Valley View, it was a little different, but the lack of communication between the two groups was stunted because of some outside factors, and so I think facilitating by naming both and having them in the same boat and working together towards this, whether, and I know that Grace and I have talked about, the renaming, if we were to have two schools that consolidate into one, do we need to do that? Do we need to rename? I think we need to let our communities weigh in heavily on that as to how that should be handled.
I think we need to watch what we're intoning by saying two going into one. That is not necessarily going to be the case with every possible closure.
With all the moving parts.
Yeah, I think
Right, with all the
I'm
moving
using
parts.
these examples
Yes,
right here,
right.
where this
And
happened,
both
but
of you
going
lived
forward,
through a two into one.
yeah, or not really. It was a
Oh,
one
did you?
into one. It was, yeah.
Okay.
It was what?
On
What
the-
happened at Valley View?
So in Valley View, it was Valley View completely went into Central, but part of Central went
Just
off to
absorbed.
Grovecrest.
Okay.
And
I
similar
can-
happened
There
with
wasn't any-
Sharon,
That's what I was
or
gonna
with
ask.
Sharon and Cascade. All of Sharon went to Cascade, but some of Cascade's boundary went to Centennial.
But but with the Valley View, it was just absorbed into Central. There was never any discussion of renaming the school, or even though I think 60% of the student population after the merge were from Valley View. So it was more of just
Valley View just moved over
it
to
was just an
Central.
absorption.
Yeah. And most of ours that we're looking at are going to be something similar, less similar to Hillcrest, Sarah Park, and more similar to mushing of boundaries to make it work. Am I a
I think
little bit of both?
I think we might see both.
All right,
Could
thank
see
you.
both.
Thanks, David. Mushing is the technical term. And you can imagine being a Sarah Park student that you're going back to the same lot, but there's a new building, there's new teachers in the building, there's new students in the building, and it's a different experience, right? So I would think that they would need some notice as well, or at least hope for some. Okay. Approach number 3 would be giving notice to a very small number of schools that you would actually be thinking about actually closing and kind of ignoring the impact to the other schools. Now, this may satisfy technically the code, depending on how we interpret it, but very little flexibility. You would pretty much name a very small number of schools, and you'd have to navigate in those few schools that you name. Mixed information, like at first we put here that would be informative, more informative, but it's informative to the schools you're closing, but to the schools who are being impacted around it, you wouldn't be informing them of much. So it's kind of mixed information there, depending on which perspective you take. Any talk about, let's give you some examples of this. These aren't perfect examples because maybe notice wasn't given to all the schools, but these are more simple closures. Valley View closed, went to Central, and then they reboundaried some kids. Sharon Elementary went to Cascade, and then they reboundaried some kids. So much more straightforward examples. Any comments on this approach? Very few schools.
Well, I kind of already alluded to this a little bit, but I think that the Central community was impacted quite a bit by this change. They lost, I think, 100 or more students that were rebounding, right, Mike? You were involved in that. There's about 100 that came to Grove Crest. And so, yeah, I don't think that was maybe done as transparently or as informatively as it could have been.
The challenge that I see with this particular approach is it feels to me, whether it is or not, it feels to me like the decision has already been made. Because we are naming this school and we've already done our study essentially, and then it becomes performative to go through the motions of the hearings and all of that, and it might end up being like Provo, where if enough energy is generated, then you back off completely or whatever. And I just personally don't feel like we are. Well, I don't feel like I'm in a position to say I've made the decision to the point that we can name these schools very specifically for closure and ignore the impact.
Is that how?
I hate this approach. Let me just go on the record.
Is that how everybody feels?
Well, I'll be devil's advocate because as soon as we name schools next week, there's going to be there's going to be news stories.
In 2 weeks?
Yeah, sorry, in 2 weeks. Everything runs together in my brain. But as soon as we do that, there's going to be articles that say Timpanogos School District is going to be closing 12 schools or whatever we name. It's going to be immediate. It's just going to be a lot. Yeah. So that is something to consider, that we need to be prepared for that every school it's going to become there. It's just
But look at the next slide.
But to Jen's point, I think, and to Jen's point is this has been the traditional approach, right? Dave pointed out the first one's never really been done. And we definitely looked at that option because of all the moving parts in this massive boundary study, right?
Even when you look at DLI and ALL, it would throw a blanket over, we're telling people that. Oh, sorry. Even when you look at specialty programs, that first person would throw a blanket over everything, but again, very uninformative to
Right.
anybody.
And so, and this is kind of the opposite of this, and I think the reason it's done is exactly because of what Jen has talked about. So if we can communicate really well, maybe we can navigate number 2 well, right? But I think that's the reason why, is you don't want to alarm a whole community of, you know, elementary or junior high parents and kids, so that the normal approach is to name as few as possible.
But I shouldn't say but, and if we look at the next slide, like Dave advanced to, I mean, if we do number 1, all we're doing is saying, well, everything's on the table, nothing's been decided, and we've been, you know, at work for 9 months knowing this was happening, and now we've decided that everything's on the table and nothing's been decided. If we go to number 3, we're naming names that I don't know personally. I'm ready to even in 2 weeks, that I'm ready to say, that's the school right there, that's the one. Which means that to me, the only real option is option number 2, is we say, okay, we've narrowed it down to what kind of generally needs to happen, and let's start studying those. And then we tell staff to give us more information or whatever.
And at that point, we start eliciting information also from our constituents, our community, our principals, our teachers, our parents.
Right, and for me, it's that latter point. Joe, you used the word alarm, and I think typically it is alarming, right? But
Energy.
he said alarm. We used energy before, but energy is a code for alarm. Okay, angst. Yes, this will happen, but that angst happens whether the school is named. I mean, for me, again, I go back to the Sierra Park Hillcrest. There was angst happening on the side of the Sierra Park community, and I guess technically they could have attended and shared their opinions, but they weren't named. And so if you were really following things, then you would be aware of it. But if you weren't following things, you weren't notified, then you might be blindsided. I don't want that. I want our communities to come together amongst the angst and the alarm and work together to find the best solutions for these concerns, these issues. And so I want to notice, not everyone, because that's not informative at all, but I want to notice those that we think, yep, we want your input. Please come share your perspectives.
Mr. Maurer, in order to keep the timeline, does the 26th of August have to be when we open this?
Yeah, if you'll
I mean, that's
remember,
1 week after the school year starts. That's a really not a good time. I mean, there's no good time. There's no good time.
It's not,
Yeah,
but that's,
yeah. Was it
then we're
anger?
opening
Oh,
it.
no, it was alarm. So a week into it, alarm happens. I mean, I just think, there's no way to get the year going and kind of settled in and say, okay, now we're ready. We have no option there.
if we move it back, my understanding is that we don't meet the timeline that gives the teachers and the principals enough time to do what needs to be done.
I would just say that I kind of disagree with you, David. I think that the beginning of school is a really good time because I think more parents are paying attention to what is going on now than they are through just about any point in school. And so we're gonna have more of their ear, which is what we want. We want people to know what's going on. We want comments. And I especially want to have public meetings about all these things as soon as possible after we announce.
And David, to your question, and Hiram can probably answer this better than anyone, Jason certainly could answer it better than me, but there is a 90-day requirement.
So whether it's a
that-
good time or not, there's no choice.
There's a 90-day requirement, and I'm getting a nod from Hiram. Any closure has to be voted on before December 31st. And so that pushes it to late November at the very earliest. December 31st.
So that does give us a few week leeway, but then that's Christmas.
Right.
It sounds to me like we're kind of leaning towards option 2. I wonder if we could have some delineation so that we have like a primary notice and a secondary notice. And like a primary notice would be your school is being considered as a possible closure. And then a secondary notice would be your school will possibly be impacted by another school's closure. Can we message it in such a way that there's a clear delineation, even especially for our public and in the media, so that there's some differentiation between a primary notice and a secondary notice, or whatever term we want to use?
Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say, can you do that at the beginning? But that, we aren't to that point to know.
And I wonder, I hear what you're saying, but for me, I guess, again, not to fixate, but it's illustrative for me. I think Sierra Park closed. For all intents and purposes, Sierra Park Elementary School closed. It doesn't exist the way that it existed prior to Hillcrest coming in. And so it just so happens that there's another building that's on the same site. So for me, it's not, yeah, it is iffy. I mean, it's regardless of whether the building's still there or whatever it is, it's like your school is being considered for closure, even if it's emerging or whatever. So I used to think more along what you suggested, and I'm pulling back and thinking, no, I think those are pretty similar. So I don't know how it would differentiate. And legally, I don't know how it would get away with it either. And not get away with it. I just don't think it would
So Hiram,
work.
that means you get to come answer. When we say legal, just plan on coming up here.
Thank you. I think there are two issues here. One is whether Board Member Wilson's suggestion is technically possible, and I think it is technically possible to do it in a compliant way. The risk, and this is kind of the second point that I would say, the risk is that then you start to drift into the territory not only of approach 3, but of some of the concerns that have already been articulated, where maybe you're not ready to have your final list of schools that you've honed in on, and you also create this potentiality for a perception among the public that the goose is cooked, the decision's been made, and that the rest of this is sort of an act to check a box. So I think we could, if you are ready for approach 3, and you decide approach 3 is what you want to do, I think it would be the decent thing to let other schools that would be affected know. But it seems to me like that's drifting more into the realm of approach 3, and that we would really have a hard time splitting the baby, saying we're going to take approach 2, but we're going to focus on and call out a handful of schools.
Other comments? I'd wholeheartedly agree with that. If you tiered them, you would effectively be just doing 3, because you'd be limited to those you named as your first set of schools. So really and for sure, I think in my mind, the intent of naming a broader group of schools is, as you might have in your mind, oh, that's an old school, that's really small, that would be a good one to close. But then as you study it, you realize, you know what, that's more centrally located than we thought. And then you can move to a different school that you've named in this broader group. And so to me, again, just like this chart says, there's some flexibility to it, that if you narrow that group, you're just going to lose that flexibility. So that's how I see it. Any other comments there? Okay.
And I think the messaging too, in 2 weeks, is if there's this approach 2 and there's this number of schools named, is to really emphasize and publicize that it's not going to be that number. It's going to be a lesser number. It's studying groups that to figure out which is the best option between some geographic locations.
Okay, at what point do we, I guess I assume that at some point we'll throw out some actual options. Is that happening on the 26th? No.
Yes.
I'm not clear about that.
I don't think that's happening on the 26th. On the 26th, it's a list of schools that are being considered. And then at a later date, it's going to be actual boundaries and,
Real.
yes.
Okay, I was under the impression
Maps,
that on the
yeah.
26th that we were going to have options, and that's not the case.
That is the case. So, the schools themselves, like what
Oh,
schools?
no, I meant
She means
actual
Plans.
plans. So this is not what we're doing.
We're not ready for maps.
Yeah, and help me, broader group, but right now are we picking everybody? Are we picking a medium-sized group? Are we picking a very small group
For study.
for study?
Okay.
And then we will go back as a staff and actually develop lists of schools that satisfy what you've directed us tonight. And we'll bring back those names that here's the list of schools we're studying for closure.
Okay.
And we give notice to the public that we're giving you notice, we may be closing your school.
So are we ready? Do we vote? This is study session.
No,
So
we
mean,
just,
let's decide
no, we just
where are people sitting?
tell staff what we want, right?
Okay, so back to
We give
Ada
direction
and,
to staff to do option 2, to present to us next week, or 2 weeks. Sorry, let's switch. We'll do them every week. Let's do board meetings every week. In 2 weeks, we're directing staff to bring to us a well-curated list of schools that we can then consider to open for a closure study.
and within that study, we look at all the different ways to make those work.
Right. And that will take time. That's not going to be
Yes.
in 2 weeks.
Right.
Is there any discussion from the board that they would like to add for direction to staff in regards to this?
Well, yeah, I think then staff would have to create dates where we could study that, and one of the studies would be meeting in the school with parents and school employees of some sort, to where we know we're going to listen to, let's say we have 5 junior highs and 15 elementaries, and we're meeting with them. So that's part of our study, is listening to what people have to say. So we're gathering all the information and can make the most informed decision possible.
Yes, and so any of the schools that would be named for study of closure on the postcard that we would send out after August 26th would say a specific hearing date. Then there'd be a hearing held for every school named in possible closure. But in that, a hearing,
Meaning in this kind of meeting,
Correct.
we'd open it for Mountain View High School, and then we'd close it for Mountain View High School. We'd open for Orem High, we'd close it for Orem High.
correct.
Would we have an opportunity to meet to go to the school and be at the school and hear as well in kind of a less formal setting?
Correct. So the law requires the hearings, 1 hearing and 2 board meetings outside of those hearings for community comment. And then
Say that again, 1 hearing and 2
and
board.
2 other opportunities in community comment board meetings to be able to share. And so that's easy to get in the 90 days.
okay.
The meetings at schools, open houses, or cluster meetings as we've had are not required, but we recommend holding. And so whether that's every single location, or the other thing on the 26th, it's not, in 2 weeks, it's not just these are the schools that the board would like staff to bring back and that we're studying for closure. It's also going to name all the schools considering for boundary study, which we think will be a much larger list than the ones studying for closure. It might include all schools in the boundaries because of all of the moving parts of it. And then with the boundary, there's also a requirement, the boundary studies require 1 hearing and 1 board meeting for comments, but not a specific one for every school that's being considered for a boundary study. It could be in groups. This could be the elementaries in Northeast Orem. This is the boundary hearing for this. But then each of those schools, if they were named in a closure, they would have an individual hearing. And there could be multiple in each night. We could have a 6, a 6:05, a 6:10. We could have 5 or 8 in one night. and
But
to
they
the-
are open. I mean, I just want it on the record that those are, there's no limit. I mean, we could limit the time that each person gets to speak. If we had 100 people show up, we could limit them to a minute. But as many people that want to come and talk will be able to come and talk in those hearings.
when it's a hearing.
When it's a
And then when
hearing.
it's the other community comments, we have the 30 minutes, but those would be outside of that. But yeah, the requirement, there is not a requirement to have open houses, cluster meetings, focus groups, but that would be, I think, what the board intends and what staff would recommend is to be able to have those also.
Also, 3 of you were on the elementary boundary committee. Which 3 were on the elementary one? And then 3 of you were on the secondary one. Who was you? So, Guy, you weren't on either of those committees, right?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. So this might be a good exercise. You can tell me if it's not, but in front of you, you've got the robust schools criteria. And you also have a sheet that shows quite a bit of information about each school. And this might even clarify your thinking, but I know for staff it would help to listen to you discuss this for a bit so that we can develop a list. Like if you can start with elementary or junior highs.
No, I suggest we start with secondary.
Secondary schools.
That's the easier conversation in my mind.
So looking at secondary on this sheet, so you got your robust school criteria of what we want to do there, and then here are the bottom 2 groups are junior highs and high schools. I think it would be a good conversation to actually start to talk about what schools seem to you individually and then as a group, which schools seem reasonable to consider to be on this kind of short list, this medium list of schools, and which schools seem unreasonable to you for one reason or another. Joe, did you have a comment? I saw you pull the microphone. Okay. So do we want to have that discussion about secondary schools first and start talking about them?
We start with high schools?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was. I was going to start with high schools and say we in our committee meetings we reached the conclusion that the 4 high schools were fine in terms of meeting, for the most part, the criteria that we have for robust schools. And if it
With a
with a reconfiguration,
Which is what the will of all the poll as
meetings,
well
yep.
as all the meetings, there's a nice feel for that's what we'd want to do.
correct.
The feeling is preferable than closing a high school is to have 9th grade there, given the 2 options, right?
Correct.
And the target there is 15 to 2,200 for a 9-12 school.
Right. Yes. So that seemed like a win for us. I mean, that it was just like, okay, no, we're not interested or feel a need or see any benefit in closing any of the 4 high schools.
The ramification of that is that we'd have to look at Pleasant Grove High School as a rebuild really quickly, given that a portion of it was built in 1959, which is
Correct.
older than you and me, Sterling.
That's pretty old. Right. The junior highs, it seemed like there were, even in bringing the 6th grade, if we were to bring the 6th grade up, that we still felt there was be a need to reduce from 5 to 4. That was really going to be best. And that was also influenced by our conversation around feeder systems, whether how much we wanted to have a pure feeder system or as close to a pure feeder system as we could versus a non-pure. And so, Grace, do you want to speak any more to that?
Yes, I am a huge advocate for true feeder schools if possible, just because it would help programs, it would help kids if we're really truly student focused, allowing them to go with a cohort group to the same school. For those that don't know what true feeder schools mean, it means that the complete junior high would go to the same high school. And we can't do that if we have 5 junior highs and 4 high schools. So we need to close one of them. But it would allow programs to be better. For instance, right now, Lake Ridge, my daughter has a bunch of her friends that are in her orchestra class going to Mountain View and not as many going to Orem High. And so sometimes they drop off the program, and it's harder for the orchestra teacher or band teacher or any program to go between 2 or even 3 junior highs and trying to recruit kids to come to their program, and it just makes a lot of sense in so many ways.
Leaving the feeder, anything else you want to say? Leaving the pure feeder, which Grace just talked about. One of the other things we looked at is the age of the schools, and Orem Junior, which has had 2 remodels, was built in 1963, but the classrooms, most of the classrooms were built in 1963. And we also talked about how Lake Ridge and Pleasant Grove were both built in 1975, which puts them at 50 years old. And the design of both of those aren't ideal, in that they're both were built, I believe, for open classrooms, and it's a maze. I mean, I've been in these schools 100 times each, and I still can't find anything in either one of the schools. Whereas the Canyon
How old are
View-
you, David?
Yeah. The Canyon View, Oak Canyon, and even the Orem Junior model, it's pretty easy to find your way around that. You know, you get a classroom number and you can find it usually. So we did talk about how Pleasant Grove Junior and Lake Ridge were both not ideal as far as age as well as the design. Orem Junior, the design's fine, but it's aged. So
I will build on that and add that in looking at those 5, it seemed, after some discussion, the proximity criteria in our robust schools really came into, I think, highlight for us. It was like, okay, if we're really taking into consideration proximity, then it seemed to remove Pleasant Grove Junior High from consideration, because it's the only junior high that's up in that north, PG is north now, up in that north part of our district. And that really kind of eliminated Lake Ridge, because it was the only school that was in the south as well. And so at least my recollection of our last conversation in our committee meeting was that rather than creating secondary deserts by considering those 2, we would take those off the list and be comfortable in studying those more centrally located 3 schools. Is that a fair recap?
yeah, and I'd also say, I mean, some of the things that leaned other directions was the Canyon View property we might lean towards Canyon View depending on what Orchard does, or we might lead away from Canyon View based on what Orchard does. And so we have those kind of issues there to kind of look at. I think all the schools had things that would lean one way versus the other way, and that's why we like the study.
I think it'd be helpful if any of our secondary principals who are on the committee have anything to add. We'd love to hear your perspectives about, consolidation, configuration, either one of them. Kate, JD, Jamie?
Yeah, how do you feel about 6th grade coming up?
I can speak to that. Do I need to like say my name and my social security number? Yeah. Should I stand? Okay. I am standing, David. Okay, so having the opportunity to be an elementary school principal prior to my current assignment at Oak Canyon, I look at this potential of having 6th graders join the junior high / middle school as being a really good thing. One of the things that I noticed as an elementary school principal, most materials are K-5, and your 6th grade students are kind of on a different planet for lots of reasons. They've kind of outgrown the elementary setting, but at the same time, the rigor, it's different than the rigor you're seeing K-5, just because it's different materials, different approach, etc. Speaking from the junior high school level, our ninth graders, which it's a non-issue because it sounds like our high schools are really supportive of them going up. It's very hard at a junior high to play 2 games. To be playing to our 7th and 8th graders and providing them a nurturing space and really focusing on learning and process, but then we're playing the high school game with a high school schedule, with high school credits, with high school, accreditation and all of that. And it makes it really hard to be really good at both, in my experience. So I am definitely in favor of the 6th graders joining the middle school if the 9th graders go. The other thought that I had too, if you've got high schoolers for 4 years at one school and elementary schools for 7 years at one school, and then you have a 2-year blip for 7th and 8th grade, junior high is a speed bump. It's not a destination. It's just something in the way of high school.
Well, and the ability to create a culture with just 2 grades, it's a lot
It's
more
much
difficult.
more challenging. Did anybody else?
Well, there's a lot of schools that do the 2 years. I mean, Nebo does 2 sets of 2 years, and they liked it so much they went back to it after trying our model. So.
Got to be careful, like David Smith, what I say. So I really appreciate the board willingness to get together into these smaller boundary committees and like study this out, talk about it, go through, ask questions, all those things, because we're talking about things that impact people, impact students. And one thing I've noticed is that our board is committed as a whole on giving our students the best education possible. Now the hard part is, okay, if we're going to reconfigure and consolidate, how do we go about doing it? And those are the hard conversations that you guys will be having, that you'll be asking us to have. And then you're not just representing yourself and your own opinion, you're representing all your constituents. And so those become hard conversations and hard things. And I think grounding ourselves in these robust ideas and these things, if we can stay solid to those, as we have conversations, difficult conversations, it will be better. And so I'm, like Kate, I've done elementary, and so I see the possibilities of K5 and 6-8. I love my 9th graders, and so it'll be hard to lose them if that's what happens. But I think anything can be done and done well if we have the right people around it, which we have awesome teachers, we have awesome community members, all those things. And if we really want this to be easy, we just homeschool all our students, and we don't have to do these meetings. Oh, is this going recorded? I apologize. That was a joke. The last part.
So John Hanks, Pleasant Grove High School. I agree completely with from the high school principal perspective of maintaining the 4 high schools. It's great. The 9th graders coming to the high school, the more of a possible in reality that seems to be on the horizon, the more excited we are about it. You know, the high school principals, we've talked. There's lots of opportunities that are there, lots of good positive reasons why having the 9th graders would be a positive thing. It'd be an adjustment, something we'd have to, get ready for and make happen, but we can do it, and it would be great. Pure feeders would be amazing, just logistically, with culturally. There's so many advantages. Maybe we could talk for a long time about those, but just the idea of having a junior high school that aligns with the high school, if it's possible, makes a lot of sense, especially if you're going to have 4 junior highs and then 4 high schools. And so, yeah, everything else, I agree, was well represented what the committee talked about.
Can I ask the junior high principals, what do you see it looking like if 6th grade moves up into a middle school model? What kind of types of models would you consider for the 6th graders? Or one of the things on the survey was a concern for the social emotional well-being, that transition, it is younger than we're used to. So are there ideas in play, ideas that we could use to, I mean, like I've heard of a sixth grade pod where they're in a middle school setting, but they're somewhat isolated.
Yeah, and we're already seeing that in some of the elementaries. There's some elementaries that have our sixth graders, instead of having one teacher, they have them with 3 teachers where they're rotating. Here you're going to math with this teacher. All the sixth graders have this math teacher. All these have English. So in some ways, some of those sixth graders are already receiving what they would generally receive in a junior high setting. And I think you could be creative. You could do pods. You could do a true middle school model if you really wanted to, where these 100 kids have these 3 teachers or 4 core teachers. These 100 kids have these. There's lots of possibilities for those things. And really, I think what we would want as middle school principals is the opportunity to try and experiment and to research and find out ways to do it, because we'd want to do it well. We'd want those 6th graders to have good experiences as well as our 7th and 8th graders. So.
I would agree with that. I feel like it's way too early to be able to say it would go exactly this way, and there's plenty of 6-8 models statewide that we could look at and see the best, not to mention nationally, but there are people we can learn from that are fairly close to us. But I think we could do a better job with the nurturing and with the social emotional component when we're not playing high school too.
And I didn't mean to ignore Peter and Cindy on that question, if they have anything to say there.
And then while we're waiting for that, I would like to ask John Hanks about some of the feedback that we've received is the concern that as far as data goes, when ASD has had 9th graders in high school, that the 9th graders on target for graduation went down the tubes during that time. And so have you guys had any thought as to how, and I mean, in your secondary committee, since I'm not on that committee and I'm not able to go to that, have you had any discussion about that, about how to address those 9th graders so they're not just the least thought of kiddos? So Peter, let John respond. Then you can respond to both questions, guys.
Yeah, no, and we have definitely had conversations and heard those concerns about the 9th graders who have that very focused goal of leaving 9th grade on track, and how nice it is for us to receive those incoming 10th graders that are on track for graduation. And so we would have to definitely adjust. Some of the things we've talked about, however, are the advantage of us being able to work with them with their schedule. And so from the beginning of 9th grade, seeing the whole picture of what they have to do to progress those 4 years in order to graduate, you know, we have things in place to identify 10th graders in the beginning that are falling off track. We would apply those same things to the 9th graders during the school year that are falling off track, and then be able to meet with them as the counselor or the admin that will be with them for 4 years. And so I think that while we do lose that really focused attention that those 9th graders get in the junior high, we gain a 4-year support structure that those students will have the day they walk into the high school. And so the junior highs have done amazing work to do what they've done and have them on track. But I think that we would be able to adjust and pick up where they left off as far as having those students for that complete 4-year process. So they're not going to fall through the cracks just because they're the first of 4 years. They'll get, in a sense, more consistent attention because we'll have them those 4 years. Does that make sense?
Can I speak to that too? Is that okay?
May,
so
David.
Thank you. That was a concern of mine because in my previous career, that's what I did, is gather graduation data and track 9th grade, 10th grade, and see what you're talking about at Westlake, at Cedar Valley, at Skyridge. Then somebody said to me, it could have been John or one of the other high school principals, what was the end result? In other words, did the graduation rate at those 3 schools that have had the 9th grade drop because of the 9th grade drop? And as I reflected, it did not. So yeah, maybe they were a little less focused on ninth grade than our junior highs were, but in the end, they had yes, and they were back up.
The other thought I had on that too was all of those schools at the time were around 3,000, big schools, where our schools here, if it was that way, they're going to be medium-sized high schools, so maybe that played into it also.
I'm just wondering, and maybe you could answer this question for me. I know when my daughter decided she wanted to do a full year of choir, she had to give up a PE credit, which made her not on track to graduate, but she was easily able to make that up the next year when she was a sophomore. So are a lot of those the kind of things that they might be doing it to be off track, is just switching their schedule around, which makes them not on track, but still able to graduate?
Yeah, and then the advantage of then sitting down with the high school counselor in ninth grade is to say, you're okay making this swap, and let's get your schedule in 10th grade to reflect what you might have missed in ninth grade. And so, yeah, exactly. Great point.
I can just answer from not as much from a structural perspective, but from a cultural one. I would send any of my children to any of these principals and their teams and their schools. I've walked through them. I've talked. I know these. Well, I honestly think that we might have the best secondary leaders in the state, country right now. Our middle school, we are just really, and I'm not just speaking hyperbolically, like we're positioned really well right now, given the leadership that we have in our middle schools. If you couldn't talk to Kate for more than 10 minutes to know this person cares about my kid and their school. Jamie's the same. Grant's incredible. Jeff, I'm not. Oh yeah, Derek, you listen. Wow. I mean, we are really in this. So I feel incredibly confident on in that respect. No matter what we say, there's going to be schools that would do this wrong and schools that would do it right. We are positioned as well as you can be positioned in our secondary schools, the high schools as well, for this kind of movement, because it does require incredible leadership and teams and faculties that trust their leaders, and that is something we have, and it's just not something you can buy or make up. So that's where I'm confident.
And what you're referring to there, Peter, is the opposite side of the robust school criteria that is so crucial. We can get all of this right, but without this, it's still going to be
exactly
right. So we have to get that right, and that's what you're describing in my mind.
Yeah, and I'm just very excited, knowing that the hands that this big task would be put in.
Cindy?
Cindy, do you have anything to add?
I think I mentioned this a little bit when we were in our boundary study sessions, but to go back to the question of any frameworks that might be able to be put in place for the parents to sort of assuage their concerns about sixth grade moving into junior high. And I mentioned to a few of you that I attended a 6th through 8th grade school in the Jordan district when I was growing up. And some of the things that helped us as far as framework types of things like that, or logistical opportunities, where we had the same homeroom teacher for 15 minutes all 3 years in a row, the first 15 minutes of the day. Same kids, same teacher. So you had this little 15-minute bit of consistency all 3 years. And then in addition to that, as scaffolding for the 6th grade students, they had us for our core classes in what they called a pod. And so just for language arts, science, history, and math, we rotated with the same students for those core classes. And then we filtered out into the other parts of the school, and we were able to have some electives like the bigger kids. And it was just a nice initial step, bridge from elementary into secondary. So I think certainly things like that could be considered to help parents who are concerned about their 6th graders.
Would that also address, Cindy, I know we've had some questions from our 6th grade teachers as far as endorsements, being able to teach at a junior high level. Would that take care of that issue. If they were just teaching sixth grade core, then they wouldn't need to seek recertification.
If they're just teaching sixth grade like they were going to teach in the elementary school, it won't matter where the building is, they would be endorsed to teach that. If they started teaching, let's say, they're going to do half sixth grade and half ninth grade special CTE, they would have to go and get an endorsement.
But what about sixth and eighth, though? If they were going to teach, they couldn't, like, you couldn't have a sixth grade teacher that doesn't have an endorsement come into a middle school and start teaching a section of eighth grade math, right?
If it's the same subject, I'd have to double check on that. But for most of those, they have to have a specific endorsement. Though there is a streamlining process right now going on to cut all of those and have like one endorsement to be able to teach lots of classes, and I think that will help in this situation.
Yeah.
I think that's, at least from when I asked about this months ago when it came up, is it's schedule driven. So if a kid on his schedule says math 6, that teacher has to be endorsed in math. If it's just sixth grade core, they can teach a variety of subjects. But as soon as it's specified as a subject, they have to be certified in that subject. That's how I understand it.
I think we'd want them endorsed in the subject, especially in the subjects that I'm most aware of. We'd want them to because of the academic advantage of that.
But we could have time. It's not that they would have to, like, it's not something they'd have to do in the summer and have it done before kids came on campus. There's time.
I just have one more question with the idea of sixth grade going up. I was very hesitant at that idea when we first started talking about it. I was not pro. But the more I think about it and the more I think about the opportunities for sixth graders, could any of the junior high principals speak to what kind of offerings could they actually try at the junior high that they would not have an opportunity to do if they were still in sixth grade at the elementary?
Anything your mind could come up with. So like these elementary principals talked about earlier, some of them are limited, right? Some offer a music class, art class, and a PE class. They don't have, a lot of them don't do instruments, don't do that. I think in a middle school model, you could really, again, when we talk about robust and size, if you have a little bit more student population, teacher population, you could have foreign languages, you could have music classes, you could have lots of different things. So really endless possibilities. You could offer CT related classes, intro to things like that. And so really everything. So I was just in California yesterday talking to a nephew, and I said, hey, what do you take in sixth grade? And they said, oh, we don't get to choose any classes. So it's a middle school model, but they are assigned to classes, including their specialty classes. And so it almost mimics a little bit of the elementary model where every kid takes the same music, the same PE, the same whatever. But I think we would have lots of options. Again, asking for your guys' permission to let us be creative. So.
One of the things that has been problematic to me since returning back to secondary is the fact that a 7th grader can sign up for, say, Art 1, but it's the same Art 1 that's offered for credit for our 9th grade. And there are some kids that are literally taking the same classes over and over again. I think it would be so cool to have delineation between, and show some progress and not have that same kind of bottleneck. We also had talked about at my school, like if some of our CTE spaces weren't used the same, like making a big maker space. Like we got really excited about some of the possibilities of repurposing spots, but also having something that's maybe more age appropriate for our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students, rather than taking the same class 9th graders are taking for credit.
I think this has been a great question, and people that I've talked to, parents that have had the concern of this on the survey of my 6th grader moving up, scared him to death because they're picturing what the junior highs look like. They may say my 7th grader struggled with the transition from going to knowing we're just in a core class, and now they've got to figure out 8 classes, and there's big 9th graders there, I think, in their mind. But I think if they have this understanding, it could be a simpler model. Their 9th graders aren't there. they're going to have this bridge. It did, the people I've talked to, it's calmed them quite a bit when they understand it's not the same model, it could be different.
Yeah, I think one of the main concerns was the CTE and especially the funding that's attached. What have been your thoughts on that? Is there any replacement for that? And, are we going to see some opportunities still there? Because that's a wonderful age to explore your options and talents. And I'd hate to see that disappear.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's a great question. I feel, though, that these questions are moving us further into the study of that, and it's preventing us from having a conversation around what are the elementary schools that we are thinking about. Because I guess I'm thinking about it not being a member of the elementary committee. If next week is the first time that I hear any thoughts about specific schools, I mean, we on the secondary have articulated, hey, we're not thinking of recommending any high schools, and we're thinking that it makes sense to recommend these 3 junior highs. I'd like some kind of a ballpark understanding of what's happening at the elementary level so that in 2 weeks, it's not the first time I'm looking at that and saying, oh, wait a minute, why are you thinking about that? Help me see what you're, and we've got to then vote, because if we don't vote to move it forward, then we're delayed. So I started with the secondary because I thought that was going to be easy, but
This is never easy.
I know. Okay, so
Well,
I'm a
just
slow learner, but I
consider
really
this.
think we ought to start thinking about talking about elementary if we
Okay,
could.
Dave,
Let's
do
do
a
it.
do a 1-second answer.
Yeah,
or
'cause
a
No, that's where I
20-second
was
answer
headed.
about
I was just going
CTE.
to say elementary should be really easy to solve, so let's move forward with that one.
But I think the point we want to make too, if the secondary committee is saying 3 junior highs, the important thing is when that gets out to the reporters or public is that doesn't mean 3, that the board's considering even closing 3, right? It's studying 3 to close 1.
What are we really, is it 1 junior high we're really looking at in the end? So let's just, okay, and if it's down to 2 choices.
No,
then
it's down to 3 though.
Well, my list has 2.
I am so glad your list.
I'm just doing the math.
My list has 3, guy.
Okay, I have 2. And we got to move on. We got to have some help. I mean, and
On the
how many elementaries?
That's
Are we?
my-
Is that 4 or is it 6?
Or is it 10?
Well, it wouldn't be
Or 12.
10.
Okay, good.
He means to close.
Yeah.
And
So I
and us
agree.
in-
We got 12 minutes, folks.
and with us around here, I love this and see where everybody's at. But with the board here, staff's got to get.
Yep.
We got to.
Give them
That's what
their
we haven't
marching
given. It
orders.
says, bring us back. What schools are the ones that are going to be?
So in front of you, again have your robust criteria. You have this statistical chart. What comes to you? What seems obvious? What seems foggy? Go ahead and start talking about
Well, and
schools that strike you.
Yeah. Yeah.
What have you talked about?
I will report what we have talked about in our committees. So we've had
Thank you, Jen.
good.
But can I say, I want to bookmark my issue because it's an important, okay.
Oh, yeah.
CTE funding. We will talk about that. Yeah. So we've talked at length about elementary schools and the need to follow the criteria. And so we started kind of just with numbers as far as enrollment numbers was the beginning discussion, and looking not just for this next year, but 2030. So we were looking at enrollment for 2030. So if you look on this informational thing that you guys have, the projected enrollment for 2030 for a lot of our schools, as Jason has shown in prior presentations, it gets quite low. Like we are at the majority of our schools by a vast amount are below that robust criteria. I think there's only 2 or 3 that are not. So that is what we started with the conversation, recognizing those schools that are going to be below that criteria. And that is, like I said, a vast majority. I think that Orem, Cascade, and Trailside and Vineyard are the only ones that would be above the mark for that. So then we narrowed it down to those schools. So we kind of took those ones out. Actually, Trailside we recognized was a little high. And so in that robust criteria, there is a floor, but there's also a ceiling. So we recognize that the Trailside isn't totally in the clear because something needs to be done to alleviate. And then we started looking at both the age of facilities, the accessibility of those locations, and what was our fourth thing?
Condition.
And the condition.
And location.
Yeah, and location. So one of the things I think that we're going to have to grapple with as a board is the proximity of schools. I think we've heard that a lot, that having schools not peripheral to the boundary of a school boundary is better than having a school that is at the very top. I mean, I think with some of our junior highs, with the placement of our junior highs, I've recognized that there's not a lot of choice in that matter because they are where they are. Our public needs to recognize that building, what are the costs? I would like to put that out there. What are the costs for new schools, new high schools, a new elementary, a new junior high? Approximately, Jason?
Yeah, the most recent has been about 40 million for elementary. It's about 90 or to 100 now for junior high. The high school out west is 175 to 190 or so for the high school.
Yeah, so I mean, ideally, we'd love to be able to just transport to put our schools in different locations that would make it more centrally located, but we're working within these with what we already have, what's already been built. So we kind of narrowed that down based on, so first criteria was the enrollment and then location and size availability. Michelle, did you want to add something? No? Okay.
No, I just said,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
we're
and
good.
so we have narrowed it down kind of to 10 in our committee to be studied, and those are in no particular order. I'll try to do them
And
alphabetically.
Jen, just to emphasize, these
Yeah.
are to study. There's no
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah,
So
I
go
hesitate to
ahead.
say this because
Yeah.
I know that
No,
the story is going to go out. Timpanogos is closing, and this doesn't mean.
Those are the ones that are affected as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
possible closures plus the ones being affected. What's on your list?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to go alphabetical. Aspen, Linden, Orchard, Bonneville. I'm terrible at this. Aspen, Bonneville, Linden, Orchard, Orem, Foothill. I see, I totally missed that one too.
Yeah.
Foothill, Parkside, which ones did I not say? Now I'm trying to.
Rocky Mountain.
Rocky Mountain. Yeah, so Orem, Orchard, Northridge, Windsor, Foothill, Bonneville, Rocky Mountain, Linden, Aspen, and Parkside. But there's still discussion in our committees as far as, and Windsor. I thought I said Windsor. Yeah.
Yeah, let me see if I caught those. Foothill, Orem, Orchard, Rocky Mountain, Northridge, Linden, Windsor, Aspen, Parkside, Bonneville. That's what I captured from what you said. Was that
Yeah.
the ones?
And I think a lot of our discussion, it came down to, at least I noticed, that we have a lot of schools that ASD has rebuilt in the recent past. So it was interesting how many that were, it kind of seemed like the 2000 mark. We have several schools that have been built after 2000, and it doesn't make sense. We need to utilize those resources that we have that have a longer lifespan, I guess. I think Westmore came into that discussion a little bit because it was rebuilt in 2013. Their enrollment is projected to go down some, but there are certain locations that we are going to have to deal with by boundary readjustments to be able to alleviate. So we need to take that into consideration when we're looking at consolidations or closures to be able to create the numbers that we need to in all of our schools. Another thing I want to mention is in our committee meetings, as far as ALL and DLI discussion, because that was brought up, and we decided that was kind of allowing the tail to wag the dog. If we try to look at those programs first before our robust criteria and getting solid schools that can then support those programs, we're doing what has been perpetuated and has caused a lot of the problems that we have. So we recognize that we want to look at these numbers first, and then we can address the DLI and the ALL later. We also want to point out that we're not trying to make schools that are at full capacity. And I'm hopeful that with the K-5 that's going to allow our principals, we want to allow our principals enough space in their schools to be able to use their TSSA funds if they can't afford to have an extra classroom, reduce a class size for whatever reason, or to have room for their specialties. We want them to be able to have that flexibility, and we don't want to bring them to the brink of capacity. Anything else, Michelle and Ada from elementary committee, and then I'll turn it to the principals quickly to.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
With that? Seems like if we put a compass on Windsor and drew a 1.5-mile arc around Windsor,
There's
all the
multiple
schools are right there. Maybe not Orem, maybe Orem would miss, but the rest of them are just right there. I have in Parkside 1.5 miles. I think it's.
I know David ran it.
Yeah, there you go.
He's very
There
aware.
you
There were
go.
days definitely when the run was
Yeah,
not.
it seems like it's all that. Like the north and south maybe take care of themselves, and whereas that central is where we're overpopulated of schools, underpopulated of.
To me, it's similar to the junior high issues. You have the outlying areas, and then you have the central Orem area where it's just all been congregated, and that's where our focus needs
Thank
to
you
be.
for pointing that out, because that kind of connects to my brain with what we started to study with the junior high. Yep.
I'm really smart. Thanks.
Yes, you are.
I just wanted to point out that we were kind of protective of the schools that are boundaried with the others, with the Aspen Peaks.
Yeah.
Do you want to
so
speak to
specifically,
that? That's
Mount
your area.
Mahogany is going to be coming in. We're going to have students coming from Barrett to Mount Mahogany, and it was also the same thing with Cherry Hill and Westmore down south, and Manila up north. Manila is an older school, but it is going to be. We're going to have that to bring in those Deerfield students, hopefully, and it creates a desert of a school up in that area.
Jen, I think it's really important that we got Barrett and Deerfield, that we have to consider students coming back, not just what's there now. I think it's a great point.
Yeah.
My one question that I have, just scanning the enrollment figures for 2030, I kind of had identified all the ones, not being on your committee, but I had identified most of them. The one question that I have is Central Elementary.
Oh, Central.
Can you speak to Central Elementary? And Orem was a question mark as well. It didn't seem like its projected numbers were such that it would be under consideration. So
a lot of it was facility for Orem
Facility.
Elementary, and so we looked at it with Parkside being a possible rebuild on the Geneva property, that could maybe address that. So that was a consideration, but it's hard for us to make these decisions looking forward. But I think that's something that we as a board, in talking with you individually, have a desire to do that rebuild sooner rather than later. And Central, that's going to have to be addressed by boundary. It's a new school. It also houses the Space Center. So that's something that we need to address by boundary.
Is Central the same size as Grove Crest?
Yeah. It's
yeah,
about
but
the same
it's the same model.
right?
Sorry. Okay.
Pretty much.
But
I
with
think you
the
guys have
space,
two extra classrooms.
But is the Space Center in addition to that?
Yes.
It's included in the square footage.
Well-
That's why it's a little bigger on this.
It's 85,000 and Grove Crest is 74.
Okay,
Yeah, so
so
but
it's bigger with the Space Center. It's not smaller because, yeah, the school side's not smaller because the Space Center's there. Okay, thank you.
they just have 2 less classrooms at Central. But what's interesting is that I mean, it speaks well to the fact that they actually closed Valley View, because if you look at the numbers projected out for Central being down to 385, and that 60% of those came from Valley View. So, yeah.
Of your list of 10, Jen, which of those, I wish geography was clear in my mind, would
And
consolidation of
I
one of
don't-
those help Central?
I don't, well, no. Well, yes. Yeah, actually, closing Linden, we would be able, or Rocky Mountain. There are some neighborhoods that we could, yeah. And yeah, anything from the principals that you would like to add, or questions from the board for principals?
I'd like to thank David for pointing out that Windsor is the center of the universe.
It was, and
I really don't know. I just want to say that I do appreciate the way that the committee has gone about looking at things, because even last week or 2 weeks ago, when Julie made the comment about her small school, that was really part of my consideration but if we close another school, you're not going to have a small school anymore. So that is going to change whether they close or whether a neighboring school closes. That's going to impact them, and so that field changes anyway. And I have been at a big school. I have been at a smaller school, and it really comes back to the culture that's built there. I feel like you can have those relationships. You can have the same activities and things. It's a little more crowded in the hall, but yeah. And Windsor's the center of the universe, so just keep that in mind.
So just reflecting thought, we initially, from Jen's list, we got to 10, and then we've added Central as a concern. Are there any others that, as we move into trying to make some recommendations, are there any other ones that we should keep on our list of consideration before we get some recommendations to you?
I'd like to give Mike and Vic and Julie a chance to say anything else before we adjourn. Anyone?
Do you have any, are there specific questions?
No, just your thoughts as to the process possibly, and yeah.
How are you feeling?
I would just like to say that I think the process has been very intentional, and as we've looked at different possibilities, I think we have pulled out a lot of different concerns. Jen mentioned that we started with enrollment numbers, and you have to start somewhere. But I've been really impressed that other pieces of information have been pulled out. The age of the building, demographic considerations. I think we have unearthed the challenges that come with this, and so I appreciate the board considering. I felt for a long time that from Pleasant Grove to South Orem, there needs to be some kind of adjustment in boundaries, and whether it involves school closures or something, we have an opportunity to make a really healthy district. And it's hard. It feels like we are, we're maybe cutting some things that we love in order to be healthy moving forward. And I appreciate the criteria that was set first. It makes it a little less emotional, because everybody is emotional about their school. We want to save our schools, but it allows us to look at things logically. And again, for the health of the district and the overall experience of students, I think we're on the right track.
To echo what Mike said, the process has been very well thought out and intentional. I guess one thing I would invite the board to consider is to continue to invite divergent thinking, especially as you look at grade configuration, as the board, from my perspective, you've heard a lot of in favor of and not a lot of counter arguments. And I think one could create sound, logical arguments against the rationale that has been presented. So I invite the board to maintain a very open mind throughout this because the grade configurations will impact every school directly, and then in turn those communities. So I just invite you to be cognizant of that. At the same time, to quote a former superintendent, you go slow to go fast. And I'm speaking as an administrator, a former sixth grade teacher, and as a parent who would have a child that would be moving up quickly and potentially having not only changing the grade configuration, but also changing boundaries, changing schools, school closure, all of that. That's a lot to ask for a student. And we've always heard the argument of teachers are resilient, administrators are great, and kids are resilient. They go through hard things, but that's just something I'm inviting you to be cognizant of saying, as this is happening, pace, I think, is equally important and should be considered. And then just the other thing just want to mention is that there's a lot of great opportunities here, and I'm excited for these opportunities because with opportunities come growth, and growth can lead to unique successes. And so I'm really excited for that. And again, I just invite the board and others on various committees to be very divergent in their thinking. That's all I want to say.
5 years ago, I was an assistant principal at a school with almost 1,200 students. So I can say there's a difference between a 1,200 school and a 400 student school. But I do believe that we can still have a nurturing, good environment for students at a 500 student school. But I agree with Vic. I really appreciate how open and thoughtful that the board has been, and I agree with what he said about continuing to listen to other ideas, and because I'm sure there's things that we haven't thought of, and I think I just have been sitting here thinking about how to help my faculty and my parents make this transition, because I know change is hard, and so it is something that we're all going to have to work together on to do this smoothly and in a positive way to benefit students.
I would echo what Peter had said about our secondary principals, the same for our elementary principals. We have the best, and I'm grateful for them and the time and effort that they're putting into this. Grace?
Can I just ask one question? Not that you need to answer it right now, but to think about it. As a parent of several Sarah Park kids, I think most people who are in that, most parents who were part of that formation of Centennial would now say 6 years later that it was a very good thing. Not all, because there's always somebody who probably still wishes to go back. But I also think that a majority would say the process wasn't as good as it could have been. So if you could just think about the process and how, with changes, how we can make this the best on parents, families, and teachers, that would be really wonderful.
I have one question, and I don't know if it needs to be answered or not, but similar to what we did at the end of the secondary with the junior highs, articulating very clearly that 3 junior highs are being named with the intent of closing 1. We're naming 10, 11, there's a number of schools here. What's that? With the intent of closing, do we have a number? 3, 4, 5? I mean, is there a range? Is there a target?
What's the number? Should we say 5?
3 to 4, 5.
3 to 5. Okay,
Not
I
6.
just think that's. I think
Not
that,
6. 3, 4, or 5.
Okay, I just think that helps me to know kind of again what's our target here.
And can we hear a brief comment from Dr. Bowman? Well, Peter and Cindy, and Valen's not here. Peter and Cindy both commented about secondary. So that's what I'm just kind of hearing your thoughts on elementary.
No, I'm echoing what has been shared. The process is being very thoughtful. You know, in these experiences, we love that people love their schools. That's something I think we should celebrate, that people are connected to their schools and that this is a big deal for them to think of transitioning to another location. And I think we need to be validating that feeling, knowing that this will be hard, and we're going to help through, I think, being very purposeful about our process and how we take care of people, big and little people in the process is important. And are there ways that we are hearing? And that process may need to nuance in every location depending on the needs of those individuals in those communities and in those schools. So if we have that as a driving undercurrent as we develop our process, I think that will help us, but also checking outcome, are we meeting the needs of those students? And then I think as we narrow down for the elementaries, I think having a little bit of a range will help us, because it may be 3, it may be 5, it may be 4, if that's kind of where we're looking. But if we know as staff we're kind of more in that area, which is still a lot of schools, I don't want to downplay that. But then knowing that if this is the decision to get to these robust schools, get to the educational experience where we have joyful, thriving students and educators and community members, and then as we help the transition, that we are very purposeful about our work moving forward.
And I'd like to also say, kind of in combination with everything, is I think the board's committed to taking care of the students. I think we're committed to taking care of the teachers. I think we want these robust schools, thriving students, and I think that we just need to make sure we're open and transparent, and we just move forward on a good pace, but a slow pace, to make sure that we take care of students, teachers, and the whole process.
Well, and I think that's kind of why the as you asked about, just feels fast, why do we need to do it? And I think by coming up with that decision and making that decision in December, it gives that time. It gives the time to celebrate, mourn a loss. And I know we didn't get to do that at Valley View. That was taken from us. We never had that opportunity. We did everything. We had to do it under the radar. And so, yeah, that's going to be something that we'll focus on.
So Katie just sparked this. So having been through a study for closure twice, you talk about taking care of people and communities. And this last time, I was very disappointed that the board made the decision to hold and let new districts, because if you're thinking about it, 2 schools could have closed a year and a half ago. I mean, we could be in a different position now than we would have been. And bringing it back around time after time after time is wearing. And so that would be my suggestion. I don't want my school to close. I don't want any of our schools to close. Like, I feel all that. But at the same time, bringing it back around, I think, is more damaging to a community than taking care of what you need to and making those hard decisions. And I appreciate your willingness to do that. Because it has to be done. We know that. We look at all those robust school things, and to get there for what's best for kids, something has to happen. So there you go.
I think the intent of the board is to do things now that will last 5 to 10 years. You know, we don't want to, like you said, keep bringing this up. Let's do things that last.
Yeah, and we recognize that things are changing. We are dealing with also the here and now, and there are considerations we have to make for that. But that doesn't preclude us from doing things different. We also cannot make decisions. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that. We are way over time. So I'm going to adjourn our study session at 5:44. We will be back here at 6 o'clock for our board meeting.
Let's set a thing, let's get us a little more time than 15 minutes break. Can we do that? We don't need to start at 6. We don't. We don't.
Legal?
6:05.
6:05.
Or 6:10.
Six 6:11. Sorry for the late start. We did end our study session late, so we just pushed the start meeting back for our board meeting. So welcome to our board meeting for the Timpanogos School District. It is 6:11 on Wednesday, August 12th. We welcome you all to join us. We're going to start tonight with our Pledge of Allegiance, which will be given, led by Katie Bowman. Then we'll have an inspirational thought by Darren Draper. I would like to make a special note of a thank you to Rob Smith, the current superintendent at Alpine School District. He and his wife, Melissa, donated our flags. So we now have a state of Utah flag and an official United States flag, not the classroom one that we had in the corner for the first 9 months of our existence. So we're grateful for these beautiful flags that we have. So Katie, if you will lead us in the pledge.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Noticing and naming is a strategy instructional coaches use with teachers when they're observing a class and the behaviors in a class, maybe video after the fact, where the coach and the teacher will notice specific things and put a name to it and describe it. And when I met with you and gave the opening thought a few weeks ago when we were at Timpanogos High, if you remember, if you recall back, I named a practice called Chesterton's Fence that you may have noticed in your time since then, where sometimes things are in place and we should first ask, why is this here, before deciding to tear it down. As I've thought about where we are as a district and leaders, an adjacent principle that I thought might be helpful to name and ask you to notice as time goes on, and one thing that I've noticed that we've been talking a lot about, the principle is called the innovator's dilemma. And the innovator's dilemma was first written about by Clayton Christensen back in 1997. He wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and when he talked about businesses, how sometimes even the most successful businesses and our best business leaders can make all the right decisions for their current set of clientele and current conditions, and yet still, as time progresses, they end up losing their leadership in the field. And the reason they do that is because they don't focus on some of the, he talked a lot about disruptive technologies, but sometimes they don't focus on some of the little things that eventually will end up becoming big. And in our case, in leaders of the new school district, I thought it would be helpful just to have this question right here at the forefront of our minds. If we were designing this from scratch to meet the needs of students 20 years from now, what would we do differently? And I think if we come back to this question as time goes on and ask ourselves, if we weren't building from where Alpine is, and we're just starting all over, blank slate, would we do what we're still planning to do? I challenge you to think about this innovator's dilemma, as we progress over the course of the next few months I love the conversations we're having today and over the last several weeks, being very intentional in boundary studies
and asking about consolidations and asking questions that I feel really will impact students 20 years from now. So good work. I hope in naming this, we can come back to it.
Thank you, Darren. Appreciate it. Okay, we now have time for our community comments. We have one person that has signed up for our community comments. I always read this instruction before starting that. Patrons who wish to address the board are asked to sign up prior to the meeting. This opportunity will be reserved for patrons living within the Timpanogos School District boundaries. Individuals living outside of TSD can submit written comments to the Board of Education. There is time on the agenda to allow for up to 3 minutes for public comment, and 10 patrons will be given a maximum of that 3 minutes to address the board. Written comments can be submitted at our website at alpineschools.org/Timpanogos. That's not the whole thing, but you kind of get the idea. Speakers should introduce themselves by stating their name, and the board does not engage in a discussion during public comments, but may arrange a follow-up time for additional conversation. And I may add that a lot of times we address things in our board comments at the end of the meeting. Personnel issues are not appropriate discussion items for an open meeting environment. If you have a personnel concern, we ask you put your concerns in writing and address it to the Board of Education. Yeah, I think that's good for today. Our one person who signed up for a public comment is Keith Wilson. Keith?
And it's still Keith Wilson. Thank you. Thank you for the work of the administration and the board and all the others who've been part of the boundary study and reconfiguration work. There's an immense amount of work going on, and appreciate that. As you know, the next steps will probably get more energized than some of the ones we've been through. I attended the study session just completed and appreciated the approach based on what will create the most robust environment for our students. That was so clear. It's clear that the vision and values of robust schools was the underlying all of your work. There was no discussion of budget pressures. Without being able to vote, our district has been handled a significant budget shortfall that must be addressed. But the discussions were driven by what will make for the best opportunities for our students and teachers. Making more robust schools will make better schools and significantly improve the financial position of the district. Thank you, though, for making it not about money, but about students and teachers. Thank you for articulating the vision and values and then working consistent with those for the betterment of the district.
Thank you so much, Keith. Okay, I'll turn the time over. Oh, no, actually, I got to do the approval of minutes. The board received minutes in your board docs before this meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as were sent to you.
I motion that we approve the minutes.
Okay, can I get a second?
I second that.
Okay, so motion by board member Smith, seconded by board member Hilton. Any discussion regarding the minutes? Grace, usually you have something. I was waiting for you. Okay, seeing as the
I just want to encourage everyone to go and read our minutes. They're fascinating.
And I will admit that we use AI, right? We have an AI program that helps us with our minutes. So that's very nice. There's some really good benefits to AI. So they're very readable. If you ever want to go, need help getting to sleep at night, you can go read our minutes. But okay, seeing as there's no more discussion and it's been motioned and approved, all in favor of approving our minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Seeing none, that has been approved unanimously. I'll turn the time over to Dr. Jensen.
All right, we just have one routine business item, that is the expenditure report and claims. Those are in your board docs, and I would recommend that those be approved. If you have any questions, we can certainly refer those to Jason.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the expenditure report and claims as presented in our board docs.
second?
Now, who motioned?
Oh, I motion
You motioned?
to approve the financial expenditures.
Okay, I have a motion from Board Member Sorensen. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second from Board Member Wilson. Any discussion on these?
Can Jason just speak to it just a little bit, like he has in the past?
Sure.
Thank
Board
you.
Member Smith. Jason, can you please speak to our expenditures? And are we on budget so far? I think we're like 3 weeks in or 4 weeks in.
Yeah, so this is just the end of period one, so the end of July, so it's just the first month. So this is in FY '27. So you'll be familiar with these first pages. We had a finance committee meeting today. We talked about the different funds. So this is Fund 12, which historically is a Fund 10 and will become Fund 10 when next July. So next year, Fund 12 will become Fund 10, the general fund. And then we have Fund 36, which will become Fund 32. So nothing really drastic to report here, just normal operations of things. Most of these are in salaries now, and not a lot of salaries, just basic information there. Some materials and supplies, but if we read the report there, the receipts expended for the month was about $100,000 for the fund, the general fund.
Okay, any further questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the expenditure reports and claims as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that has been approved unanimously.
All right, we have a handful of discussion and action items tonight. The first one is resolution number 2026-014. It's a memo of understanding with Aspen Peaks and Timpanogos school districts. This is for the data collocation, and what that basically amounts to is that we will serve as backup systems to each other in our districts. As for our data, there's large amounts of student data, and we want to protect those, have a backup, and this creates a redundancy system where we will be their backup, they will be our backup. And so I would also recommend that we approve this MOU. I believe Aspen Peaks passed this in their last meeting, and so it's just us that needs to approve it.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve resolution 2026-014, the MOU between Aspen Peaks and ourselves for data co-location. Can I get a motion?
I'd like to move that we pass resolution 2026-014, the MOU between Aspen Peaks and Timpanogos concerning data co-location.
Can I get a second?
I'd like to second that.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, two things. Is this revenue neutral?
This is revenue neutral, right? Yeah.
Okay, and the second one is, can someone define collocation? I've never heard that word before.
Yeah, this.
I'm confident Darren can explain what collocation. Yeah, two locations.
Co-located.
Two locations. If you break down the Latin on that, David, co.
We'll have some data in both locations. Okay. Thank you.
And my
no
understanding.
further discussion from me.
My understanding is this is kind of like backup between the districts. Timpanogos School District houses the main data center for what is currently the Alpine School District, and as such is a very important component in the overall network for the what will be 3 districts. And it's very complex, and this is a complexity that we knew that we would have to work through, and so we appreciate our technology, those who are familiar with the requirements here for making allowance for this contingency. So we need to approve this.
Is the Aspen Peaks location completed?
Darren, could you?
Mostly, there are a few final things that we need to do to bring the data center completely up, but we're really close. It is functional. We just have some configuring of the systems that are there.
The redundancy is helpful when we're dealing with so much data.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving the resolution 2026-014, the MOU between Aspen Peaks and ourselves for data co-location. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes.
All right, I'm going to give a little more background on this one before we get into it, but this will be a discussion or action item or action item for resolution number 2026-015, which will be a memo of understanding with Aspen Peaks for a shared transportation facility. I've invited Hiram and Dave to come on up and sit. They are two members of our staff that have done a significant amount of work. I want to thank them, but I also want to thank a fairly long list of other people. We're grateful to Aspen Peaks staff. Dave has worked closely with Doug Webb. Our transportation director, Rex Brimhall's worked closely with theirs, Dave Ludwig. We've worked closely with the superintendent, and their board has been very supportive as we've worked towards this memo of understanding, which is it's a pretty big deal. I've invited these guys up because you may have questions. This MOU is a little more complicated than a typical MOU. There's a lot to it. Hopefully you've had a chance to review it and view the summary sheet that we sent out. But to see the cooperation between Aspen Peaks and Timpanogos has been heartening, not just on this issue, but on many issues. And that's going to make both of us stronger as a result. And we genuinely want 3 strong districts. One of my daughters just moved to Aspen Peaks. I need Aspen Peaks to be a strong district, right? And so anyway, I'm grateful for that. What this MOU does is there's the bus garage for Alpine School District that's in American Fork. It's actually pretty close to our boundary. So it's almost right in between the 2 districts. And what this will allow us to do is for 3 years, share that service or share that location with Aspen Peaks to be able to run all of our transportation out of that same location. And then there's, in the agreement, is that we'll review that after 2 years and be able to ideally extend that to even longer term. And that saves us significant capital costs up front. In addition to, it's mutually beneficial that does help them save some money, but it also helps us save some money operationally. And so with that description, what you've read, if you have any questions, these 2 guys know way more than I do about kind of the details of this deal. But it's fairly significant development.
Okay, so as a board, I will entertain a motion to approve resolution 2026-015, the MOU with Aspen Peaks for a shared transportation facility.
I'd like to make that motion.
Can I get a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now I open it up to the board for discussions/questions.
Sterling, do you want to address Anderson Farm?
Well, I was just wondering, just want to clarify here, this is for a 3-year period of time with the possibility of extending it longer if it is mutually agreed upon. Is that correct? And that
yes, that's correct.
And then that review, that formal review of whether or not to extend will begin in 2029. Is that right?
Yes, it would begin essentially 2 years after the beginning of Timpanogos's and Aspen Peaks operations. So July of '29, they would meet and discuss whether it's working, whether it makes sense to extend or just cut it short at that 3-year mark. That benefits us in that it gives us a year. If it determines that this isn't working out, it gives us a year to find another location for a permanent bus garage. Thank you.
I'd also like to address there might be the question like, how come this didn't happen right out of the gate? In negotiations there, as I've said time and time again, the only thing that has been constant with this job is change. And so there was a time when we talked about it, and Aspen Peaks was willing to do it for just 2 years. And we felt that the sunk cost that would be required to do that for 2 years, it would make more sense for us to just do it on our own. And it seemed at the time they had other needs, and so they're changing as well. They are going through the same processes that we are. So not to say anything bad about them, but they had other thoughts for that property, and that has since changed. As I said, things keep changing. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. Also, it's been so helpful as we have hired staff that these are now known entities. Before it was this ethereal idea of, okay, these two people who we don't know would be working together to try to make this work. Now we have Rex, and they have Dave, and they've been able to come together and they've worked together and can see the way forward to make this a win-win for both districts. And so that is so helpful and exciting. So it's not that we've been holding back and holding out. It's just the nature of the beast. Things are going to keep changing. And they will continue to change over the next year until we get started. How many days, Joe?
About 320.
About 320 days. They're going to continue to change.
Board President, will things stop changing after that? Is that what you're saying?
No. No, they don't stop changing for us till we're out of office, David. Then we can.
Was there also a shift in the services, like how much we own and how much we share? Wasn't there a little bit of a shift there that it was going to be at one point like just a consultation type of an agreement where we...
Dave, can you speak to that?
Yeah, for me, early on when we weren't really discussing, it was just an idea. There was a lot of things that were thrown around, but what people understood about the other side. But as soon as I raised it with Doug Webb and with David Ludwig and with Joel Perkins, it was full on support. So I don't know where that changed, but no matter what the arrangement, every time we brought up different wrinkles, they were in full support. So I don't know where all that came from, but I couldn't ask for any more positivity from them and us to them. So I don't know where it all divided, but as soon as it was seriously brought up, it was nothing but support.
And that came about as these roles were filled.
Yeah. And it kind of came to a head when we decided let's start to broaden our search a little bit of what to do here. And there was just no barriers to create a plan with them.
Right, and I guess I would like to add that it seems that as we came together at first, shared some ideas, bounced some ideas around, it never got to this level of detail. But it got to a point where both boards felt like it was in our best interests to consider other alternatives, never closing the door on this and never even actually putting it, away. But it was just like, we need to do due diligence in case this does not pan out the way that we might think. And hence, we started considering other options. And that led us to consider properties that we already had, one of them being Anderson Farms. And so I think it's just important to recognize that this process that we're engaged in, as Jen mentioned, is a process that takes time, and we had good intentions all the way through to find the best outcome. And I think in sticking with that process, I feel really very, very good about this arrangement. And at this point, I hope it lasts for 20 years. I just don't see any benefit to building our own if we don't need to. But things change.
A couple things. I just want to remind the board that one of the first things we did as a board is go visit of properties, our properties, and one of the properties that we visited that wasn't ours, or the only property that we visited that wasn't ours, I think, was the transportation. We did that really quickly. I guess we did go to the print shop, so there's two places, and from early on, that's what I've wanted, is to share that. So I'm glad it's worked out. Thank you to our staff and Superintendent Jensen, as well as their legal person who's helped with you, Hiram, and David Ludwig, Doug Webb, and Joel Perkins and their board for doing that. But that's been said already, but that's from a board. Thank you very much to those people and the board. And then some questions to Hiram. There were some last minute changes. I went through the first document pretty carefully just to try to understand it. And then when I got the second document, I didn't have the time to go through it quite as carefully, but it didn't look like there was any substantial changes. Can you talk to what changes did happen?
Certainly. First, I'd like to echo some of the same things you said. This came together pretty quickly, and Aspen Peaks has been very prompt in responding to our comments and drafts and getting us feedback. So I think every day between Thursday and Monday, we exchanged a different draft. The first draft was essentially an agreement in principle that hasn't changed much. There were a few points that we wanted to fix with the second draft. Those points were related to dispute resolution mechanics. Essentially, if there's a concern, David and Rex are going to resolve it. If that doesn't work, it goes to the superintendents. And if that doesn't work, we pull a mediator in that we split the costs for. Another thing that changed that I think was pretty significant was the term. Previous to this, we kind of had an open-ended arrangement. Aspen Peaks came back and said, no, we really do. We want some kind of a hard line at 3 years, but we want the optionality to extend. So we fixed the mechanics around that so that we know, and this benefits us too, I think. We know that we get 3 years out of this at a minimum, and then have a chance to extend if it suits both sides. The changes that were made on Monday were largely formatting. This is kind of a complicated MOU. There are a lot of mechanics here. You could split the fees that we're paying into at least 3 different buckets. So over time, there were a lot of defined terms. And on Monday, what we did was we revised our numbering system so that this is more easy to read. And we created an exhibit where all the defined terms live. So if you're reading along, or if any member of the public wants to see this and is reading along, they can go to that exhibit anytime a capitalized term is used and can know exactly what they're reading. So I think that makes it more user-friendly and accessible to our constituency.
And then one last question, if that's okay. As I tried to do the math, we're saving money in employees because we're sharing and we're paying 40% as I looked. But we're also
With 5 employees.
with 5 employees, yes. The bus drivers we have, the bus drivers they have, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the
It's
employees that we're
custodian
sharing,
and the
custodian.
service department.
Yes. So if we're saving money there by not hiring our own, but it's costing us by renting the different stalls, and it's a relatively cheap rent.
Bottom end of the estimate.
Yeah. But so in my mind, as I'm doing the math, it looks like we're saving money, and we're using a lot of that saving money to pay for the rental spots that we're renting. In the end, it would, I mean, if it costs $16 million to buy property and build something like that, or if we don't buy property, $8 million, whatever, we're saving a ton of money for a long, long time. There's no break-even point ever because we'd just be saving so much. Am I doing the math there?
At some point there's going to be a break even, but it's going to be a couple of decades down the road. It's going to be a long time. And I've heard some people even comment, there's no cost. There's a cost. It's just being paid for through the value of the parts and the value of the trailer. So we are paying, and then when we get to the end of that 3 years, we're going to have to evaluate what the true costs are going to be at that point. So we are paying. It's not, we don't have to pay for this. We do, just through different means.
And then And then Aspen Peaks will be getting that payment. So it's beneficial to them because we're sharing some of the costs and giving them money. It's beneficial for us because in the end, we're not paying as much as we'd have to.
Yeah, at the end of the 3 years, they will own all the $2 million worth of parts that would need to be split up, and they will own the trailer that we will pay for to bring on the site. At the end of the 3 years, they will own those things, and we won't have interest in those anymore. So the true costs will come out.
If I may, I think that this is a really good example of the way that the terms of this MOU are both fair and generous. For example, we're trading a trailer for some rent, right? But then Aspen Peaks is letting us use that trailer. You know, we're working out of that trailer at this facility. So I think they're really being quite gracious with us. To your point about break even, based on the estimates that we have, our cost for these service bays and these bus stalls is estimated to be about $1 million every 3 years. So that would put, if our transportation facility really is 16 million, that would put our break even at this current cost at between 48 and 50 years.
I just want to say that as a mother, one of the first things I teach my kids is to share. So I am so glad that as adults, I'm thrilled to say that we have learned how to share, and it's a beautiful thing that we can show our kids and our students.
Is this chart our costs? This summation? So this is our cost, not the total between all of the bus garage?
Correct. Some of those are things that we can offset, though, with the parts, with the trailer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and to create some clarity too, we will need to pay for the costs of the trailer and moving it on, which is probably between $250 and $350 million or $1,000. Yeah, the break-even point just reached 2 months, but $1,000, and then there's still the yearly operating costs. So don't, and David Ludwig's estimating that to be about $1.7 million a year to operate the facility, the transportation facility. So there's still substantial costs. We're just, the space is what's been worked out, is really, but the operation is still a cost. No, that is 40% of it. That's.
Oh, the 1.7 is 40%.
We're
So-
doing this, we'd be paying that at our own depot. So yeah. So it's not, the 40% is only on those 5 employees that we will share, which is a custodian, I believe, and 4 service people. So those are the only ones. That was one of the things I think early on in our negotiations actually was the fact that I've mentioned when I was out campaigning, I heard from teachers, yes, but I overwhelmingly heard from bus drivers as far as some of their concerns. And so I felt kind of this need for us to have control or autonomy over our own bus drivers. So giving up that. So this is just a win-win, I think, for a lot of my concerns anyway.
And also be aware too that if we don't do a little bit, if we don't become a little more efficient with unfunded routes, that cost could become a little more. If we get better, as we reboundary, if we get better at those unfunded routes, that cost will shrink a little bit. So there's a lot of play in that operating cost depending on what we do.
Yes, Guy.
You know, it's a great facility, and I have to hand it to a few board members that really pushed for that many years ago to build that bus garage down there. The only trouble, we made a mistake.
Might one of them been Guy Fugel?
Yeah, well, no.
It
I'm
should
not
have been
taking
built
any
in
credit,
Pleasant
but
Grove.
We should have built it east a half mile, and then we would have been on our, but we didn't see I didn't see that coming, okay?
You didn't follow Darren's thinking, right? That we needed to look
But-
20 years down the road.
But that bus garage, they have the best mechanics. They're well-staffed and administratively, and so it's just a win-win for us, and that's where, back in January, where we wanted to be in being able to share that facility. So I'm just ecstatic about this.
Well, and a word for Hiram too, it was amazing to see the confidence even Aspen Peaks had. when we said, well, who can help us with drawing this up, they all pointed towards Hiram. So a lot of confidence in him too.
And when we toured that, there was a sense that they wanted to stay together. So I'm really pleased with that.
Okay, any other further comments from the board? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of approving Resolution 2026-015, the MOU with Aspen Peaks for our shared transportation facility. All in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that passes.
Okay,
One
the
thing on there,
last-
Superintendent, do you want to mention the Aspen Peaks, their plan for it? Like, because they haven't approved it yet, but.
Oh, yeah. So Aspen Peaks plans to bring this to their board tomorrow evening. They have their board meeting tomorrow night. So, good point. All right, the last item of discussion and action is the approval of the 2027 board calendar. It's on the last page of your board docs. And so this is for 2027, starting in January, going through the calendar year. And you've seen those, you can look at those, and we'll open it, or we'll turn it to agenda.
So the 2027 board calendar, which will be nice for people to plan ahead, those of you who are planning vacations and stuff. So I will entertain a motion to approve the 2027 board calendar as was presented in your board docs.
I motion to approve the 2027 board calendar as is in the docs.
Can I get a second?
Yes, you can. I second it.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion? Actually, I want to start with a discussion, sorry. I want you to note in the board calendar that the board president will be conducting one, and then a board member gets to conduct a meeting every month. So I just want to put you guys on notice to be excited.
Are we able
You
to
guys
vote
get
on
to-
that?
No. 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 It's up for discussion, but you seconded to approve this, Dave. So.
He seconded
Yeah.
to talk about it.
I'd also like to note that on July the 14th, the first time we will be having our meeting in the Timpanogos Education Center that isn't even coming out of the ground yet. So anyway, I hope we make that.
Good note. Yes, exciting.
That's what I was going to say, is that I'm excited for Jen to not have to do it every single time. I'm not exactly excited for me to have to do it, so I'll practice.
It looks like there's one meeting in July and 3 in August. What's the intent behind that?
Yeah, we are highlighting, we are saving a date on the 4th for possibly a truth and taxation hearing. So that wouldn't actually be a board. Jason?
Correct. So it's typical for planning, like in December and January. Alpine School District's done that. Many districts do that, is just to reserve a date with the county if the board chooses to do truth and taxation, that's already set. So that could be changed later, but that's why there's that third date in August.
Yeah, and it's much easier for us to cancel meetings and than it is for us to add them on. So it was decided to go ahead and add that one as well. Although I kind of want 2 in July, just so we can be in our new space twice. Okay, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor of approving the board calendar as was presented, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that is approved unanimously. Okay, we will now have time for superintendent and board member reports, information items, and comments. Ada, do you mind if we start with you? And we'll just go down this way.
Well, I think we're all in countdown mode because school starts on the 19th. And so I'm excited as a board member in Alpine School District. I get to visit each one of the schools that I preside with. And that will be happening on the 14th and 17th. And just to inform you as board members that Alpine School District board members have been given permission to invite you, if you would like to attend those faculty meetings, that you're welcome to attend those. You won't be on the agenda, but you're welcome to attend those. But it is a wonderful opportunity to meet with the faculty and get a feel for each school and get things off to a good start. So I'm looking forward to that on the 14th and 17th.
Okay, one of the things I want to bring up, at the end of our study session, I think it was Principal Moore that brought up about, let's get our decisions done on what we're going to do with some of these schools, because, and Jen, you know, I advocated for Valley View to stay open and really put a lot of pressure on Alpine, and that probably wasn't very wise. It didn't do our community any good by keeping that school open longer than we did there. So I think we need to learn from those things there and move on. The other thing is, yesterday I was just overwhelmed with this Region 8 PTA. One of our board members was the outgoing chair. And 16 years ago, we didn't have anything like that, okay? So that was just, I go, wow, this is the real thing. I mean, and they had food too, so anyway. So, but Michelle, thank you. And it was, and what a big crowd.
It was great. Thank you all for coming. It was a really great day, and we just hoped to build strong PTAs for each new district, and that was our focus of the summit yesterday.
Yeah, that's all I have.
I just as well want to say well done, Michelle. That was a great opportunity yesterday to be there with so many invested parents. But I also want to say encourage everybody to, if you didn't watch our study session that we just had today, please watch it. We talked about a lot of things and some decisions we're going to have to be making at our next board meeting. And we'd love feedback. And we want to know what everyone feels and thinks so that we can make the best decisions.
First thing is, in the back over here to our left, a group just left, and I wanted to recognize Shelley Schroeder, who was one of the best principals Alpine ever had, who was with a troop, a Boy Scout troop, and they're getting their citizenship in the community merit badge, I believe, and that's why they were here. I wish they would have stayed for just a minute longer. We could have recognized them, but I'm glad they were here. I remember getting that merit badge myself. Then I also want to mention Silver Peak and T-Tech has had a bunch of hiccups, and Dave Maurer has kind of talked to me about a few of those, but they're also both on target to open up on the 19th, come whatever may happen, but they should be going. But I want to recognize Zach Draper and Frank, help me with Pulley. Junior, who have done tremendous work in getting that up and going, including air conditioning that's caused some problems. And like I've said, most of the meetings, my son's going there, and he'll be happy to be there in the air conditioning. So thank you for all the work there. And then just a recognition of all the progress we've made. You think about, was it November 25th the first time we met? Is that what you said? November 25th, and we visited our schools several times, all of our properties plus more. Talked about what decisions need to be made and have moved forward on making those decisions. We said today in study session, what was this thing that we talked about? Everything's on the table, nothing's been decided. Well, everything's not on the table, and things have been decided, and that's progress, and it needs to happen, and here we are. So nice work, board, and thank you for your input, public.
All right, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. We've got a slide up here. We've got two new members of our team. Sandra Haslam is going to be our Director of Nutrition Services. And that is a pretty big deal when you think about feeding thousands of kids every day, sometimes many of the kids twice, and more of the kids even at lunch. So, and then Craig Brinkerhoff is going to be our Director of Human Resources. And we welcome both of them to the team. We're grateful for the roles they'll play. Now, I wanted to just talk about one other thing. When you watch a board, many of the things you're observing are the things that are seen, right? A transportation center. You look at those things, and those things are all important. But the thing I think I wanted to highlight today is just a meeting I got to attend yesterday with our teaching and learning team, which includes Anya, Valen, Cindy, Peter, Katie, Michelle, and David. And that will be expanded a little bit in the future. But I just want you to know that the conversations they were having honestly gave me goosebumps, because those are the conversations that will truly start to affect every classroom, each child in every classroom. And it was based in our vision and values, in that language. And I'm super excited to see where they go. Incredibly talented and knowledgeable group of educators that are being very intentional. It's totally behind the scenes. No one saw it except them and me. But that is what's going to make our school district great. If you've been here, you've heard us talk a lot about this robust school criteria. And a lot of those things are related to school size and those types of things. But on the other side of that, we've outlined elements that we've got to have in every school, regardless of configuration or consolidation or any of those boundary type of questions. And that's what that team was addressing yesterday. And I'm excited for that, because that's going to be phenomenal. So thank you.
Thanks. I wanted to mention a couple of things that we have participated in the last week. So a week ago today, I believe on the 5th, we were able to go to the administrator conference. And that was something that I've never been to before. I'm not an administrator. I'm not in the education world that much. And so that was really fun for me. It was so fun to see our team that we're going to have as administrators, our principals, our vice principals, our TSD team. It was really, really fun for me. I enjoyed it. I laughed till I cried a couple times. It was just a great time. And then yesterday we were able to attend the PTA conference, which was where I was comfortable, right? That's how I came up, was through PTA and working as a parent, and that's how I got involved with education. And so I was really a lot more comfortable there. But at both events, the focus was on providing this wonderful experience for our students. And that is the ultimate goal that we're trying to attain, is an ideal education for each of the students in our district. And so very different. We were able to introduce Sterling a little bit into the PTA world, and he was a good sport and enjoyed it. By the end, he was all on board. I would like to say how grateful I am for the involvement that I've had, and continue, as Grace said, invite comments. We need that information from our public as we're going to be trying to do this work. So we invite that. That was one of the things I thought I was the least excited about, was having public comments and having people come and talk to us and maybe be angry with us, have this passion. But I'm finding that I enjoy it so much, even if they have contrary opinions to mine. I recognize that is valuable information for me to consider, and I'm grateful for it. I also want to put a plug in for the PTA. Join your PTAs at whatever school is closest to you, even if you don't have students at a school. Find your closest school and join the PTA. Be involved. You'll get on a list. You'll get emails about what's going on in your school. The more involvement we have in our schools, the better. The more engagement from families and communities in our schools, the better our students do. There's data to prove that. So I want to encourage everyone here
on the board, I'm going to challenge each of you to find a PTA and join a PTA. So,
Join all the PTAs in your boundary.
yeah. Yes. Okay, Sterling. That's it. Thank you, guys.
I have a few comments relating to a couple of things that happened today. I really am super excited that we reached this shared agreement with Aspen Peaks and the Transportation Center. I think that was a win for both districts, and I think that's really, really positive. For me, it illustrates something that gives me hope in that we engaged in a process, and we held true to that process, and we continued to work that process, and that process generated, I think, an excellent outcome. And so I'm grateful for the processes that we've put in place. In that, I'm also, I want to thank the community members of Anderson Farm, for communicating their perspectives when they learned that that site was kind of being considered. I mean, it was just really, it was just as part of our process. And I'm grateful for their willingness to hear and trust the process as well, because I think they did. I appreciate the value that we have articulated about that we value open communication that assumes goodwill. And I think this recent exchange over the past several weeks around the Transportation Center is just a case in point of that value in action. I am hopeful and invite all of us to hold on to that value and to implement it in the coming weeks and months as we engage in conversations around boundaries and reconfigurations and school closures and consolidations. If we thought the Transportation Center generated some energy, I think that's a code word for angst and anger, then it's going, there's more to come. I echo Jen's comment, though, that I welcome that, because as long as that is done with assuming goodwill and open communication, that's going to be part of the process that's going to generate the best outcome for our district. And so I just invite us as we move forward in ongoing discussions and decisions that we assume goodwill and be open in our communication. To that point, I want to be really clear that in our study session, I'm not going to make you go watch it if you're watching this, that naming a school for consideration does not mean that that school will be closed. Case in point, we plan, I think, to name 3 junior highs next board meeting. Not because we will close 3 junior highs, but because we intend to close 1 junior high, and we are not sure which junior high is going to be best for us to do. And so we need to study that issue. That's going to be similar across the elementary schools. More elementary schools will be named than will be closed, because all of those that are named will most likely be impacted in some way by a closure. So I want that to be really clear, want to be transparent, want to be open in that communication.
We had a couple hires where I'd like to ask Jason and Joe, where are we in the hiring process as we have to do the 28% offering of contracts per SB 188? What's the status there?
Yeah, it's nearing the end. There's still many positions, or a few positions in different departments. You saw there the Craig Brinkerhoff, Human Resources Director. I believe they're doing some more interviews for some of their leads, and so that's kind of starting there. For our business team, we just finalized yesterday our last offer and acceptance for our group. So much smaller group than we had at Alpine, which it needs to be with a smaller district. But Yeah, I'd say on the district staff, which includes administrators and professionals that are in the classified ranks, then I'm guessing we're probably in the 80 to 90% on that.
And I've kind of articulated this before, but we are doing everything we can to make sure everyone is squared away, right?
Including secretaries?
It's been absolutely. It's fascinating to interview for a job you already have by people you work closely with for the last 10 years. That's a really odd circumstance, and that's what almost every district employee and almost every that's kind of what they've had to do to some degree, and that's a really strange place to be. And so we are doing everything we can to make sure everyone's kind of taken care of that way, and I think we're going to be able to get to that.
And as David said, we are moving to the point where things are being taken off of the table. That's phase 3 of the boundary study. We're moving into phase 3 of the boundary study. We had a communications committee meeting today, and we are going to work very hard to get a lot of frequently asked questions out there on our website, so that people know the right source to go for information concerning this boundary study. I know there's a lot of information out there and a lot of speculation and a lot of thoughts that we do consider, and that's information for us, but we want to be able to provide information that we're working from. And so our website is the place to go. And on the menu, on the Timpanogos District website, there is for community. And under community, you will see boundary study. And so that's where to go to find information that we're working with and from for this boundary study. PTA, I love PTA. Okay. I'm the vice chair of Alpine School District Region 8 PTA. We had the opportunity to gather all of our PTA board members and members yesterday in a summit, and it was such an upbeat and wonderful opportunity to be together and to have over 300 volunteers who care about our schools is amazing throughout the whole district. And we appreciate that each of the new districts came as boards to talk to. We broke out in sessions with each new district and had the opportunity to hear from them. But also we had the opportunity to hear from Alpine School District. And there is still momentum with Alpine moving forward and good things happening all around. And our goal is to take care of the students, and we really love to align what PTA is doing with our schools. What are the principals' goals? What are the teachers' goals? Let's make PTA and our schools work together. So that was the focus of our meeting yesterday, and I just thank everyone who came. And moving forward into Timpanogos School District, I hope that we can keep that momentum and that alignment going as well.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't give her notice that I was going to do that. So I will entertain we've reached the end of our agenda, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Can I get a second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, great, we're done. Thank you so much for coming.